Good morning, everyone. The Benefits and Services meeting will come to order. Gwen, can we take the roll?
State Controller Yee. Mr. Boykin, representing the State Treasurer. Ms. Hendricks. Mr. Rosensteel. Ms. Dumont, representing the State Superintendent of Public Instruction. Ms. Ortega, representing the Director of Finance. And Chairperson Higa, you have a quorum.
Okay, great. Thank you. So the first item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda for today's meeting.
Move approval?
Second.
Great. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any objections or abstentions? Okay, second item is a consent item to approve the minutes of the April 1st committee meeting.
Move approval of the minutes?
Great. So I think we have a motion. We have a motion and a second, right? Okay. So all those in favor?
I moved. Grant second.
Okay.
I didn't hit it right as a movement, that's what.
Thank you.
I haven't had enough coffee yet.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any objections, abstentions? Okay, then we have item number 3. Andrew. Yeah.
I'd like to thank you. Good morning. Draw your attention to Okay, are we live? Okay. I'd like to draw your attention to Benefits and Services, page 10, 9, 10, and 11, for the 2015-16 performance objectives. A number of the changes are fairly minor in terms of rewording the objectives to better align with the language in the surveys. So, for example, with the CalSTRS overall, the changes are to align that wording with what goes out to members in the survey. The same for service retirement, and no changes in disability or survivor benefits. The changes in customer service are also to align those objectives with the language used in the surveys. That's also the case for member account services. With client outreach and guidance, the changes are specific to new nomenclature that the division is using to better describe the kinds of services that they provide to members. So instead of calling the sessions counseling sessions, they're now called benefits planning sessions. And so the wording has been changed to reflect that. Moving on to financial services, there are no changes with that language. The metric in community property has been increased for 2 of the goals, and in terms of defined contribution solutions, there's a new measure and then a change to another metric, again to align it better with the survey, and a second new measure to better capture the experience of the members with that program. And then there's a new section, employer reporting and contributions. This is a combination of member account services and financial services in terms of the coordination between those 2 units in providing these services to members. So that section is better reflecting the kind of work that goes into providing that service. And the measurements will be tracked along with everything else. So our recommendation is that the board go ahead, or the committee go ahead and approve the proposed changes to the service performance objectives.
Okay, are there any
Are there any
questions
questions?
from the committee?
Second?
Okay, so we've got a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? No? Okay, thank you, Andrew.
Thank you.
Andrew, just one other thing. Was this one of the reports that we were going to present to the board as for consideration in or asking whether or not this is something that you wanted to continue to review and set objectives, or if it's something that you would rather delegate back to Jack and have those performance objectives posted on the website. We're again going through the reports as we're presenting them and the activities that we're bringing to the committees and the boards, and trying to identify what works best for you and what might be a little bit too much into the weeds that doesn't rise to the level of what your attention should be drawn to.
So is the question whether we'd want to have the committee consider changes to the objectives on an annual basis, or whether we'd want to see the report?
It's whether or not you want to set those objectives at the board level, or if you would like to delegate that back to Jack. Okay. And so one of the things, we were going to be talking about some of the reports as we're presenting them throughout the committee, but as I was thinking about this, what I would like to do, if it would be okay with the board, is at the next committee meeting, bring some of the things that we are bringing, a list of those, and I know Brian is, working in the board governance committee on all the activities that, and the reports that we're bringing to the committee, into the different committees in the board, and outline which ones we think that you should look at to evaluate whether or not you want to continue receiving them, just have them post on the website, or if it's something that you would like delegated. And then we can kind of catalog all of those at once for a presentation and a discussion. So I just wanted to bring that up so that we can at least introduce that idea as we move forward.
Okay. So there-
Can I add one more thing? I think the struggle we have is that you're approving operational measures here of the organization, and we do quarterly performance reviews in the organization of all of our customer service, and measure many more things than this. So, because obviously we have to run all the detail of the organization. So we're subsetting these in some way and trying to figure out what makes it a board level of interest and measure and board responsibility and what doesn't. And in us doing that, we know the boundary is not clear to us. And that would suggest to us possibly, it is a bunch of operational activity. And that's what we started, where this kind of came out of was, I'll be honest, years ago, when I first started here years ago, we had some real customer service challenges with the new system, and had some real breakdowns back in 2002, and when I was hired, and the staff really said, we've got to get some clear measures and goals around getting customer service back on track, and then it just gets history to it, and we do it every year. So that's why we're pausing, is we realize we've got so many measures that we're using internally. This is a set of them. If they're interesting, that's good, but I'm not sure it's a board responsibility. We're not sure. It's your call.
Right. Okay, there are a number of members who'd like to speak. Grant?
Thank you. I was just going to say that we, in a way, get two looks at it because we look each year at the service level accomplishments. We have that item on this agenda, and so that would be an opportunity where at least it's in our radar and we could suggest changes at that time. So, I don't know if we're making a decision today, but I'm fine with, making that change and delegating to the CEO the service level objectives.
Okay, Betty?
I think ditto. Yeah. It is really what I consider kind of an operational, set of issues, and if there are other opportunities really to look at changes that we've made that really affect customer member service related types of issues in our regular course of board work, and we have an opportunity to weigh in. That's really the only thing that I'm looking for, is just some opening for us to provide input, but I'm fine with the delegation and just having this posted.
Right. Okay. So is this something that we need to take formal action on, or just kind of direction to staff, or take it up when we look at the whole body of reports later?
Well, I don't think we don't need to take action today, but my recommendation would be to come back to the committee with a list of our recommendations for you to evaluate whether or not it's something you want to delegate, have posted, and then we can move forward with action from there. Brian?
I'm sorry, I think the procedural way we should do this, if we have a recommendation from the committee that normally receives the report, then we would take that through board governance as we look at the overall issue. And then the board governance, I think, would make a recommendation to the board itself, listing all these reports and the inputs from the committees and staff, so that there could be a comprehensive decision-making process. I think that's probably the best way to go through, and I know,
And we'll capture then all of the reports across the whole spectrum that way too. So,
yes,
yeah.
and it'll be part of our fulsome discussion in November.
Okay. Okay, so yeah, I think the recommendation will be that, to the Board Governance Committee, that this is something that can be delegated to Jack. Okay, any objection to that? No? Okay. Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you.
Let's see, I think we've got agenda item number 4, the 2015 Annual Member Satisfaction Survey. Ms. Dobbins? Welcome to the committee.
Okay. So, good morning, everybody. I am going to give you an overview of the results of the annual member satisfaction survey. And I've talked to most of you, I think, a number of times on this topic. This survey is conducted once a year, and its primary purpose is to provide some insight into the member experience with CalSTRS. So just to give you a quick update of what you're going to see this year, our 2 key performance indicators, we look at overall satisfaction and we look at member engagement. Those 2 measures remain stable year over. We have, for some time, been tracking some service performance items, specifically timeliness of replies, and keeping an eye on this item. This year, we see some movement in both staff performance and service performance items, and when we get to that part of the presentation, I'll point that out. So this is an 11-year trend line. We've been looking at overall satisfaction of our members for the past 11 years. And what you see is an incredibly stable number. There's, some bumps along the way, but in general, the number hovers around 67, 66, and it remains at 66% of our members expressing high levels of satisfaction overall. I've got a couple of slides that dig into that overall satisfaction measure, and this particular slide looks at overall satisfaction by life stage. And what you see is there's some variation over life stage, and it's consistent with what we know about our membership. As our members age, they tend to interact with us more as they're approaching retirement, and those interactions tend to be positive. So you see that those numbers bumping up as you go across the age deciles. We believed that trend line was the way it was due to interactions. So we did this analysis where we looked at overall satisfaction of those members who've had any sort of interaction with us over the past year and those who haven't. And what you see in the split out in the bars, the teal color are those members who have interacted with us, and you see that there's a bigger percentage of those folks who've had an interaction providing those high level of satisfaction ratings. And the gray bars, those members who haven't interacted with us, they're not sour on us, they're just neutral. They're really expressing very neutral opinions.
Do you want? Excuse me. Yeah, hang on.
Silly question, but isn't responding to the survey interacting with us? So I guess I'm just trying to understand that, have not interacted with us, but we have data on that. Do you know what I mean?
That's not a silly question. It's a very reasonable question. And in fact, you probably could consider touching the survey some way of having an interaction. And in fact, in one of our questions, we actually asked people's awareness. I'm going to get to some awareness topics later in the presentation. We're going to say, what was your awareness before you read this in the survey? So we recognize that as you have. And for the purpose of this particular data, we actually define an interaction with the purpose that the member was seeking us. So were they reading our newsletter?
Instead of responding to
Yes,
us,
yes.
sort of, okay.
Does that make sense?
That does make sense. I think I'm just, when we have these conversations, I'm always trying to put myself in the seat of a member. And I know I get, probably like everyone else does, a ton of mail and calls and emails. And so I typically respond to things I care about and throw the things away, And so I just wondered if, how we defined it, the responsive piece.
Right.
So that's helpful. And it sounds like you're gonna
Right.
talk more about
I'm
that.
not quite
so.
sure if it's the next slide. It might be. Yep. It's the next slide. Across the bottom, you see all the different ways that we define interaction. So we ask members, did you visit us on calstrs.com last year? Did you read the newsletter? Have you called us or have you emailed us and so on?
Alyssa, there's another question from Paul.
Hi, yeah, I'd like to go back to the
Yeah.
previous slide. So this says that of the people that we surveyed here,
Correct.
that 154 had not interacted with CalSTRS and 1,977 had. So the vast majority of the people had interacted with CalSTRS. Do we know from other data what percentage of our members make some kind of contact with us? In other words, do we track all the contacts that come into the service center, all the phone calls that we get, so that we actually have a separate measurement of the percentage of our members who we do have interaction with, so we can see if it's a similar percentage to the ones who
We
responded?
do, and
Okay.
I'm going to let Andrew speak to that.
Yeah, so for example, with the contact center, in terms of the calls that we receive, we know exactly how many calls we receive on a daily, monthly, annual basis. But in terms of, if we have, say, 400,000 active members, knowing which of those 400,000 were the 70,000 that called the contact center, we don't necessarily have that kind of discrete breakdown. So we know how many members come for benefits planning sessions. We know how many members call the contact center. But we don't know, for example, if the same member is calling in 3 or 4 times.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay, so we don't really, so we sort of have a maximum number, because we have the number of total contacts that have been made, but some of them might be by
That's
the same
correct.
person more than once.
But Andrew, correct me if I'm wrong, contact here, of course, is human or digital, right? Clearly the human contact goes through measurement cues here, whether it's a phone call, you come in for a counseling appointment, you write a letter, those things, as Andrew indicated, are that. We also have tools that measure technology hits to the website, but those aren't unique address. Yeah, and it's high volume, so those, and I would guess that much of that is digital interaction, not human interaction, when people answer this question. And we wouldn't, I know what you're getting at, is there a validation of the statistic by aggregating that?
I'm just wondering whether
And I-
this is a representative sample of our
Yeah.
membership. It sounds to me just, I have a lot of relatives who are CalSTRS members, a lot. Well, the interesting thing is I don't. I mean, when we get together, they say, "So is my pension secure?" And I say, "Of course it is." And that's about the extent of it.
Thank you.
The extent of it. But so I just, I don't think that they have contact with CalSTRS. That they're retired, their checks are coming in, they got nothing. Got no reason to contact us. Everything is going great, so we're doing a great job. So they don't contact us. So I'm just wondering whether this is a representative sample of our membership.
So it's a good question, and there's a fair amount of research type lively conversation around representation of survey data. The best thing that we can do to have representative data is how we select our sample, right? So the sample for this particular piece of research is a stratified random sample, which means everybody has an opportunity to be in the sample, and we divide the sample up by strata, that variable that we think folks may have, that they may differ, their opinions may differ based on a particular variable. So we divide the sample by age, because we know younger members are having different experiences than our older members, who are having different experiences than our recently retired members, and so on. So we, on the front end, set the research up to be representative, and there's some probably reality that those who respond are the people who did not, this is an electronic survey, so the people who respond are those who did not hit delete, right? Sharon, you said you go through your pile and you sort. So in terms of who responds, there's probably a little bit the people who are interested are the people who are responding.
But we try to go to different categories of.
We do everything we can on the front end to have the research be valid
Great.
and representative.
Thank you.
Can I
Sharon?
follow up to that is, so connected to that, how do we deal with the active member versus the retired member? Because to Paul's comment, I think that's a lot of members, once you're collecting your pension, typically, there's not an issue, right? You're kind of,
Right.
I'm good to go. I've gotten my 403B. I'm collecting my pension. I'm enjoying my retirement. So you just don't have that same.
Correct.
Whereas a 50-year-old or a 55-year-old teacher typically is hanging out at CalSTRS more because they're starting to think about it. So with this result, I mean, do we ask more active members than retirees, or?
I'm going to get there,
Okay.
and what you're going to see, so the value of having your sample pulled the way that I described it is that we actually evaluate the data based on those different strata as well. So we look at the responses to the data by age decile, and you're going to see some differences in responses based on those age frames. We know that there are differences, and I'm going to show you, I think, in 2 slides. Are we ready?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so these are the methods that our members are using to interact with us. And what you see year over is that there's really a significant increase in visits to our website and reading our biannual newsletter. And there's somewhat of a decline in those interactions in the other methods. And here is the previous slide broken out by those age deciles that I was speaking about. And we've highlighted the 3 methods that we saw that uptick in interaction, just to show our young members, those who are under 40 years old, really they are interacting with us through electronic means. And so if we're going to reach those, it's important to know this. It's not stunning news-breaking information. It's just confirming what we know about those age folks. They want their information electronically, beyond a shadow of a doubt. And then you look at the rest of the data. Newly retired people are absolutely, they're visiting our websites, they're still reading the newsletters as those who are enjoying retirement. So I think the folks in retirement continue to interact with us, at least they're consuming the information that we're providing. And because we think that this interaction topic is so important, we asked members what was their reason for interacting, and we looked for patterns in the data to see if people were using a particular method to achieve one outcome versus another. And what we see is this pattern that when people are seeking general information, they're going to our websites and they're looking at the information that we're sending them. Largely, they're self-serving. And as they are seeking information in order to prepare for retirement, we see a shift to the more kind of live human interactions, people accessing our workshops and seeking interactions with our benefits specialists. So I'm going to shift. I've spoken, maybe the past 5 slides have focused on that overall satisfaction measure. We're kind of stepping down a little deeper into the data with this slide and the next slide with information on staff performance. And over the years, we track member perceptions of things like courtesy and does staff have a caring attitude. And what we see in this data is that although still the vast majority of members are reporting a high level of satisfaction on these measures, the trend is decreasing. And this slide shows satisfaction with service. I mentioned at the beginning that we've been tracking that timeliness of replies number. We've seen a slight decline in that number over the past couple of years, and we continue to see it this year as well as with other measures in our service performance. Again, the majority of the members are reporting high levels of satisfaction. The trend is just a decrease year over.
Alyssa, I have a question. So the questions about satisfaction with service, those are, I assume, are limited to the members who've had interaction with a live staff person.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So they wouldn't answer that question if their interaction was just electronic or on the website?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. There's an introductory statement on the survey, and then the option is this does not apply. So if they have not had that type of interaction, they do not respond.
Okay. And are we going to get into just, any additional feedback that you have about what might be underlying the trend or what we're doing to look at the trends?
That's a great question.
Okay, great.
And you help me move to my next slide.
Okay, I think what had
Just let you do the presentation. I'll ask. Ready with the next answer.
I think,
Because we want to know these.
yeah.
We want to know these things, correct?
So if you hold for just 1 minute, I think
yes.
Grant had a comment.
Thanks. Sorry, that's probably a good
No,
idea.
that's okay, Grant. Go for it.
Kind of along those lines of what underlies it, we also have the service levels report, and so
Yes.
I'm wondering, does, for example, satisfaction with timeliness track or jibe with what we're finding in terms of actual service levels?
I reached out to my staff just before the meeting started and said, hey, what are we seeing in our point of service measures? We do not ask exactly the same questions on all the surveys, which we're actually tightening up that research this year. It's a huge accomplishment. So I'll be able to answer that question better next year. However, this year, when we look at the questions that are reasonably parallel, we are not seeing that trend in the point of service. Which leads me to this conversation about possible drivers. There's any number of reasons that data may shift. It may just be a measurement thing, like the data's being assessed and you've got a different sample this time. We tend to pay attention when we see those trends year over. I've hopefully put together a picture about member interaction with us. And what I think that the data is suggesting is that as members become savvy at kind of self-service, the simple questions, right, the general questions, they're taking care of themselves. And that leads the more complex issues to be addressed with direct interactions with staff. And there's just a reality that responding to those complex issues is going to increase job demands. I also believe that it probably changes the interaction. And you know how easy it is to just be very happy when we get a simple problem fixed and it just kind of happens. And when we're having more complex, more ongoing things that we want addressed, sometimes there's just not that immediate glow. It's just a very different experience when we're dealing with trying to resolve more complex issues. Hear, hear, right?
Joy, could I add
Yeah,
one?
of course, Jack.
If I could add one more point, Lisa, and it's actually, Grant beat me to it, but I think you want to marry this to the next report, which is somewhat the factual data, if you will, on transactional statistics. Part of that report is attitudinal on satisfaction ratings, and that's what you were just speaking to. But the other part of the report is actually cycle times. How long does it take to do things? Are we getting slower or faster? We're very proud of the next report because it's one of our best customer service records we've ever had here. In fact, on the time it takes to answer a phone call in under 30 seconds, in 14 years, it's our highest score ever. So you want to, it's not, you don't want to get too locked into one bar graph here without seeing the data, how it moves and shapes and relates to the actual transaction data itself. So, I think it's something we look at and say, that's interesting, and then look at the other data and then try and put that together into one common picture. But they do fit together, for sure.
Good, thank
Go
you.
ahead, Lisa.
Okay, shifting gears once again, this data depicts our engagement score. We began measuring member engagement in 2012, and we decided to include that as a measurement because it's overall a higher standard than satisfaction. It's a better predictor of future behavior, and we believe it's important because engaged members are more likely to try new products, they're more likely to give positive word-of-mouth recommendations, and they're more likely to be willing to withstand a few bumps along the road. And what you see in our engagement scores, it remains stable year over as well, similar to the overall satisfaction. And we see a similar pattern with engagement and its relationship to interactions. Those members who are interacting with us tend to be more engaged. And this is the engagement score divided out by Lifestage. And again, it's a similar pattern. We see variation in the numbers, and the trend is as our members age, the engagement score tends to go up. There's 15 attributes. Oh, yes.
Hang on. Okay.
So when you guys are talking about all this, and how do you guys, what's the conversation around how you move those numbers up for the younger population?
How do we
What do you
move-
guys talk about, or what do you, as you try and wrestle with that, what are some ideas that we have to get the younger folks more engaged? Because obviously, even the supplemental issue is really, I always joke in my talks that compounded interest is like the two most beautiful words in American English. And so getting people to think, younger about supplemental as well as just being informed about their retirement.
I can tell you my response as a researcher. It looks like Andrew wants to weigh in as well. I think from the research perspective that there's a pretty clear relationship between education, true understanding, and reaching the members with information that's relevant and easy to receive, digest, understand, and then actually use.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and to ping off what Elise is saying, with respect to the educational products and services that we offer, we are taking more of a life stage approach to those services and products. And so, for example, with the financial awareness workshops, we are trying to craft products and services that are relevant for members at different life stages to improve engagement, to improve the attraction of CalSTRS products and services. I mean, we know that CalSTRS is a trusted resource, and so we want to capitalize on that to provide the kind of education that members need, and we want to, kind of help them realize that they want that information as well.
I interact a lot, and I've been dragging Ed around the state, community colleges, and so 30-somethings just, they don't know what CalSTRS stands for, they don't know what a pension is, they don't define benefit, it's just, so all they care about is their students and teaching. And so I think if there's ways we can, and they're not really gonna necessarily go to a website, they might respond if I noticed on our website, we have that CalSTRS connection, the Your Money Matters publication, and I don't know if we send that out electronically to all of our members but I'm always thinking about ways, instead of us providing a lot of information through a website or through phone call, call centers, ways we can be actually reaching out to, especially the younger folks. They're just not going to initiate with us because they don't know what CalSTRS. I just literally did a back to school, workshop, and people are just like, we have retirement, they just are so not aware of it. And honestly, in general, they just don't care because they're focused on their job. So I'm just wondering if we, I think with all of our members, but especially with that demo, the 30 to 45 or 21, or I don't know, but that 20, 30 something, it just seems like the more we can take initiative with them and then just break it down. I know Ed's been really helpful, this is what CalSTRS, this is what CalSTRS stands for, this is the acronym, this is what it means, just taking it through the basics. A lot of people just don't know that, but I think it's the education, but I think it's also initiation, us taking initiative with them, so.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing, and Andrew alluded to it, and we have the Financial Awareness Series, which I think takes a broader perspective than just CalSTRS, particularly CalSTRS retirement. We talk about budgeting and a lot of other things that are probably more of interest to younger members, as well as, the kind of workshops that you and I do are really more focused around retirement, which quite honestly, probably 20 and 30-year-olds aren't fascinated by, but
They're not.
they may be more interested in other
It's not
things.
very interesting.
They may be more interested in things like the survivor benefits as an insurance product and disability benefit, and those kind of things. And, so I think we can, I think we think in terms of trying to figure out what are the topics that are most interested to younger people and respond
And
to
the
that.
modalities, like having apps or things that just kind of help with sort of how they interact with the world.
Yeah, and one last point I'd like to make is just that, we've surveyed through CEM other retirement systems to see what they're doing to reach those younger members, 30 to 45, and, there's not kind of a magic solution out there. Many other systems are struggling with the same thing that we are. I think your point about, being proactive and taking initiative to find ways, mechanisms, channels to engage with those younger members is the key.
I think stakeholders are doing a good job of bringing around everybody, but it's, thanks.
How are we doing on time? Do we want to go quickly to keep the meeting that time?
Yeah,
Maybe 5 more slides.
yeah.
We'll see what I can do. This slide and the next slide shows the responses to the individual items that make up the engagement scale, and they're arranged from the strongest response to the smallest levels of agreement. So our strongest item here is CalSTRS is an organization I can trust, and CalSTRS shows me respect. So I think that's very nice to hear. The second slide covering those items, you see kind of squinting, and I bet you guys are too, the particular item that shows a little bit of a decrease. So, CalSTRS listens to its members. So we see a small decrease there. It is significant. So I'm trying to just highlight the things that you see changing. And the 2 lowest scoring items, CalSTRS provides new and interesting things, and CalSTRS benefit is better than other employers. Those items have just been at the bottom of the set since we've been measuring.
Alyssa, hold on one moment. Got Paul?
Can we go back to the previous slide? So it's interesting, the responses that people have about sort of the financial stability and the security of their retirement. It seems a little disappointing that only slightly over half think that we're a solid financial institution, you know. And it's also interesting that hasn't changed since the funding plan was put in place. So I'm wondering if there's any thoughts about what that means or what we should be doing about it to better communicate that we are a solid financial institution.
Yeah, no, we flagged that as well, as when we saw that. Those of us that live in the Sacramento Beltway, of course, follow all the bills, et cetera. And so it feels like everybody must know that, but clearly the data says otherwise. It's obvious. And I said that a bit yesterday. It's the balance point of not scaring everybody because there's no need to be scared. But at the same time, we want to be informed about the stability of it. So we think it is time to relaunch a communication effort around this specifically. We do. I think it deserves attention. It'll be part of our discussion with you at the offsite as we see the strategic plan going forward. I think it needs attention. Yeah.
And to some extent, some of that, the issue about whether or not they see us as a solid financial institution may also just reflect on the fact that we're sort of lumped in with all the other public pension plans, and given all the ongoing media around they're insolvent, they're unsustainable, that it may, to some degree, color their perception of CalSTRS as well.
No, I'm sure that's true. I mean, but actually most other plans are also in very good shape.
Yeah.
So it's just, but I'm sure that's true, that what's happening is there is a daily dose of bad news or bad things being said about pensions, and
the
it's too
data,
bad our members don't know the truth about us then.
the research shows that there is an awareness issue, and I'll get there. We asked folks about their familiarity with AB 1469, and those numbers are interesting to look at as well.
Okay, thank you.
Just about to get there, yes. Any other questions?
Okay, so Cassandra had a comment, then I'll go to you, Grant.
I was just going to mention what Elisa had mentioned, the other data sets that we're looking at. There was a lot of attention around the unfunded liability, but the data that we've received shows that only 25% of our membership knows about the funding legislation that was passed to shore up the funding. So there really is a gap in communicating that information out to the general population, who certainly was hearing all of the negative information that was coming out about the system.
Okay.
Just along the lines of what Paul was saying, when I look at the comparison of my CalSTRS benefit to other employers, thinking that's got to be a comparison to the headline news about the rare few who make oodles in retirement, and not to the close to 50% of private sector workers who don't have anything. So.
Right. And if you look at the spread on these items, right, what you see reported is those people who are strongly agreeing with a particular statement. It's not a normal distribution. There's not an equal number that strongly disagree. There's a lot of people in the neutral, and it's particularly on that item. People, I think, answer as honestly as they can, and when they don't know, comparing to other employers, if you haven't had firsthand, or maybe someone else in your family, you don't have a lot of that information, and we see a lot of neutrals on that particular item. Okay, I promised some information on awareness on different topics, and the first one we asked members about their awareness and participation in Pension 2. We've asked this particular question for 3 years, and awareness remains fairly stable but low in the 25% range. And then of those who are aware, we ask who participates, and 22% of those people say that they participate. Not a lot of change in this data year over. Here's the awareness information around AB 1469. So we asked 2 questions. We asked people their familiarity with the legislation that addressed the funding gap, and 54% say that they're not at all familiar. Then we asked people if they're aware that the changes to the pension contribution rates are a result of AB 1469, and 71% answered no. So, yes, yes. So, there it is. We kind of floated this question to our members about whether or not they would have any interest in being automatically enrolled in supplemental retirement savings. We asked the question because in the research, it's one of the single most significant things that can be done, kind of that proactive, being active about the situation that can help people save. And I was somewhat surprised that most people, over 70%, express some level of interest in this. Got to be a little careful with opinion and interest data because people's interest tends to be higher than their actual, well, do you want it to happen? Right? I'm interested, but do I actually want this to happen? There usually is a gap there in the data. But if we look at responses by age range, even that's really very positive. The younger members express more interest.
I think Sharon.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about that. So what, because I think people on this board have been talking about this before I've been around, this idea of automatic enrollment. And what are, I guess I'm curious if we could make some progress in this area, and what are the challenges, and then what are the potential ways we can make it
We
happen?
we were gonna start having some discussions with some of the stakeholder groups about that. There are, particularly in California, there are some unusual dynamics that would have to be involved in because, the first question is whether it's in a 403B plan or a 457 plan. It's a 403B plan, given the fact that in California there can be a multitude of different vendors. The question is who gets to be the default, and that would be a big challenge. There would have to be legislation to make this happen because of the laws, and so it would be, there's a number of issues about whether or not the willingness of doing it as opposed to allowing employers to do it, or mandating employers to do it, who gets to be the default. Just as a lot of issues, I think, it would be an exciting moment in a district to have them having all the different vendors fighting to become the designated default. Assuming the legislation didn't specify who that was. But that's something we're going to have some discussions with the stakeholder groups
So we're
about.
starting those discussions?
Yeah, and to
That'd be
see
great.
if there's, the sort of following up on the express interest and seeing, if we wanted something that maybe people want to pursue.
Keep us posted on that, because
Yeah.
I just think, the retirement sort of issue is huge, people saving for retirement, but we know even for our own members collecting a defined benefit pension that they still need to supplement that
Well,
pension
and
in
particularly
retirement.
with the 2% CC2 plan, where it's a lower benefit, they
Right.
need to save more, so,
Exactly.
yeah.
And you just never see it. That's what I was telling faculty last week. You just don't see it. It just goes away, you can't spend it on anything, and it goes into that account, and over time, I just think that, so I'm glad you guys are talking, and please keep us updated on those conversations. Thanks.
Grant, did you? No, okay.
And that's all the data I have to present. The final slide is just the summary. Our key performance measures are stable. Interactions matter. We're continuing some background research on that topic just to try and understand the relationships. There's opportunity around the staff and service measures, and there's opportunity around awareness on a number of topics.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I think that the presentation was helpful, and I guess I just ask that as we, make progress on, some of the, digging into some of the numbers, as well as looking at some of the types of, communication or additional work we might do around engagement, both for the younger members that Sharon pointed out, anything we can do to heighten awareness of sort of the funding status and how we can be a resource, I think would be helpful for the committee to follow. Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry. Alyssa, hang on for a second. So I'm sorry. Okay, yeah, no. Go ahead, please. Thank you.
Yeah, Ed Foley, CTA, NEA retired. I was listening with great interest on what you think retirees are thinking about our system. Just want to remind you that the state constitution does provide that we have a retiree on the board. Perfect example. You can't, as many friends as you may have that are retired, you don't know what it is to be retired until you're retired. And so I just wanted to bring that to the board's attention again. It's now approaching, going on year 5, that we don't have a representative. I think the other thing that I found with great interest was that reaching out to the young, the millennials, the young people, I think you have a perfect opportunity to do that. When you're taking 10% of my check, you should have some interest of where that 10% is going. And I think maybe a sort of an educational program of really reaching out to explain what that 10% for CalSTRS deduction, where it goes. I am sure, I know when I talk to young teachers, they're concerned about their retirement because they don't know if there's going to be any retirement. And I know talking to a group of students at UC Davis, they really were very interested when I started talking about the new plan that they're going to have, and they are going to have a retirement when they retire at age 62. So, I think we got to find ways to tie what they're paying for in educating them, letting them know where their money is going. And I think the third thing is, I don't think we should be comparing our retirement system to another public retirement system. Let's just compare what's happening in the private sector and what's happening to many retirees in the private sector who can't really retire even under Social Security without having a second job. And in our case, some of them go back and do substitute teaching. But the great majority of our members, when they're retired, they're retired. And so I think maybe changing a little strategy on who we compare retirement with, because it doesn't make any difference. If you retire from private sector or from public sector, you're still retired. But what this country is going through in the private sector is just catastrophic. And they were trying to replicate that in the public sector too. And we keep on fighting that. We're going to fight that again next year. So, I think that in educating both the public and both our members, let's start comparing ourselves with public systems and private systems. What privatization is going through. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your comments. Good morning.
Loretta is this on? Yes. Loretta Tagenberger, United Teachers Los Angeles, retired. Repeating what Ed just said, that seat, I've been coming here many years, maybe 25, maybe 30, at first as an active. Always a retiree sat on that retiree seat. But I was active. Now that I'm retired and that seat has been emptied, I'm not represented. It's sort of like the old saying, no representation. And that is very important to our people. They keep asking me, when do we get a retiree at the CalSTRS board? And all the other things that Ed said, yes, I think some of that is very important. Our young people, when, I'm from Los Angeles, and they get their warrant and that check the printout, and they're used to be 8%, now it's 8 point, taken out. And I tell them, have you looked at that? You are paying for your retirement. And they all kind of look. Then they'll come back and talk to me about it. They need to look at that paper, that 8 point is taken out, and then I tell them, you know, the district pays and then the state. I said, that's a lot of money per month. And the young ones, like you talk about the 30-year-olds, and then the 40-year-olds are beginning, you know, they're getting a little smarter about money. And our young people are getting more financial smarts. And keep at it, what you're doing, and keep adding to it. And I hope that seat gets a retiree.
Thank you very much. Okay, thank you.